This week on The Destination Angler.
Do you change flies a lot?
Nope, that's a great question. And I think in the fly fishing world, you have to watch your downtime. And I think a lot of times we as fly anglers, we outthink ourselves. And I think people change flies too much. I make 10 times more adjustments with my indicator and my weight than I do changing flies. So typically, if I'm not getting a strike, if I think I should be catching that fish and I'm not, the first thing I do is adjust my indicator and put a little bit more weight on, and usually, boom, you're right into a fish.
And that was Pat Dorsey talking technical in Colorado's top tailwaters. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of The Destination Angler, brought to you by Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed for your level of experience and budget. By Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping trout anglers avoid the crowds and explore new public water. Download in the App Store today and get 20% off using promo code DESTINATION20. And by Adams Built Fishing Gear, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear built to last at an affordable price. Up next on The Destination Angler, we travel the world in search of top bucket list destinations with Brian Oakland, founder of Got Fishing. Then we head to the Yellowstone country to see how things are fishing after the big flood of 2022. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode, part 1 with Pat Dorsey, as we take a deep dive into Colorado's top tailwaters, including the South Platte, the Yampa, Frying Pan, and more, and explore why deep pools are so tricky, what separates a good angler from a great one, and freestones versus tailwaters. You won't want to miss these shows. Hey, and be sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts and share it with a buddy. And now you can catch the Destination Angler podcast on YouTube. And today our destination is part 2 of top tailwaters in the great state of Colorado with 30-year veteran guide, author, and trout teacher Pat Dorsey. Pat is the owner of Blue Quill Angler in Evergreen, Colorado, and quite possibly the foremost expert on the South Platte. Pat really dials it up a notch or two in this episode as he shares his secret weapons, talks fly design and hot fly innovations, and answers questions like how fast should you fish, how do you size up a new piece of water, and why he's an indicator guy. We also hear stories of the Mercury Midge, drift boat weddings, and Pat's very first guide trip. Stick around to the end for a short interview with one of Pat's clients and to hear what's next for Pat, and I think you'll be surprised. Rig up the indicator rod and let's jump in with Pat. Okay. And weight-wise, how do you organize your fly boxes? Do you organize them by type of fly and then by weight, or what do you do?
I mean, my tailwater box, I have lots of fly boxes. So it depends upon, where I'm going that particular day. And I have a big boat bag that I have all my fly boxes in. And I generally take only what I'm going to need for that particular day. And so, that's based on the season a lot of times. But I have, one box that's really just a full tailwater assortment. It's got midges and mayflies. It's got scuds. It's got some bigger mayfly dimps in there. I could pretty much take that one Wheatley swing leaf box and catch fish anywhere in any tailwater in the West. Yeah. And then I have some others that are just really dialed in, particularly towards midges, or some of my dry fly boxes I have, they're just all blue wing olives, or all trichomes, or all cats, whatever. So,
okay, in different weights too.
I don't fish a lot of weighted flies. I do carry some jig nymphs, and I like to fish those with droppers. So I do have, different sizes of jigs for that kind of, and I do have, brass beads and I have tungsten beads. So, but that's more for dry and dropper applications. But as far as just weighting my traditional nymphs, I put a size 6 split shot on the junction between my leader and my tippet, and then I adjust the weight with a product called JP's Nymphing Mud. It's a tungsten mud that allows you to micromanage your weight, and it's super slick. It goes right on that split shot, and you can just micromanage your weight with that.
Huh? Are you constantly adjusting that during the day?
constantly. So, I always tell people if you, let's just say you have 3 BBs on, you're trying to get deep into a particular hole, but and you're snagging the bottom. So, oh my gosh, I gotta make a weight change here. So you take off a BB, right? Well, what you just did there is you took 33% of your weight off. You don't realize it. You took that much weight off. But good thing about the JP's nymphing mud,
Yeah.
it's a tungsten putty, so it's real heavy, and you just micromanage it over that split shot. So you can just, you take 5% off and add 10% or whatever. So that's the thing that's a game changer for nymphing, because the back of the pool is going to, take a different amount of weight versus the middle of the pool, and the head of the pool that's a little faster might take, more weight or less weight, whatever. So it's an important part of being successful in the nymphing
No
world.
kidding. Did I hear that right? That you typically don't use weighted nymphs?
I don't use many weighted nymphs. No, most of my flies are unweighted.
Huh. Now, are you losing some connection to the fly when you've got a couple of, like a BB, a weight, and then your fly coming off the back of that? Are you losing some fish, some strikes there versus having a weighted fly, like a Euro type of a rig where you could really feel your direct contact with that fly?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a tight liner.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by them at the shop. We've got a lot of really good, Brian Kelso and some of those guys that, competitive anglers. Works with Steve Parrott, who was on Team USA. I mean, those guys that have, the Euro game dialed in, and that's not my cup of tea. So
Yeah.
I always tell people if they want to learn that, you should go out with these guys. I'm a indicator fisherman, so I'm a suspension nympher, and I'm fishing a lot of stuff mid column.
Mid column.
And just, fishing with the split and the weight, and trying to adjust my indicator and my weight to get my flies in the right part of the zone.
Okay, walk me through. So you've got an indicator, and then what do you do? Obviously, the distance between the indicator and the fly is going to depend on how deep you're fishing, but give me kind of the terminal end of this. What's it look like?
Yeah, so we fish a lot of yarn indicators. They're very sensitive. We have it on an orthodontic rubber band, and the yarn indicator really came about from a bunch of friends and I. When we were fishing down on the San Juan, in the early '90s, and the guides were always using yarn down there, and the guides on the San Juan have the slow water nymphing dialed in better than anybody. But we brought the yarn back, and a friend of mine, Clay Anselmo, was putting orthodontics rubber bands on there. So we had a chunk of yarn with an orthodontic rubber band, which allows you to move it up and down your leader.
Orthodontic is a tiny little thing that kids put on their retainers.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a little like 1/4-inch rubber band.
Yep, and so that allows you to move your yarn up and down real easily. And we usually use a 9-foot leader, usually a 4 or 5X, and then we come down into the terminating point there. I generally use a blood knot. That some people are using swivels now, and some people are using tippet rings, but I usually just tie a blood knot and usually put about 14 inches of tippet on that. So if I've got a 5X leader, I'll usually put on a 14-inch piece of 5X tippet on that, and then I'll tie my first fly on there, and then I'll tie my second fly. In New Mexico, you can fish with 2 flies. Montana, you can fish with 2 flies, but in Colorado, we can fish with 3 flies. So I usually use a 3-fly tandem nymphing rig. Keep the indicator 1.5 to 2 times the depth of the water that I'm fishing, and I'm constantly adjusting the weight based on where the fish are in the water column. If there's a sporadic hatch, then I'm dredging. I'm getting those flies down near the bottom. If there's a hatch in progress, I'm fishing a little bit higher up in the water column.
Okay, tell me again where your weight is in the rig.
My weight is about right at the junction between my leader. So we got that 9-foot tapered leader, and I don't tie my own leaders. I just buy them right out of the pack, and then so the junction between the leader and the tippet is where I'll put a number 6 split shot on. So a lot of times a number 6 is sufficient enough to keep your flies mid column. And then when I need to start adding weight, then I just take a piece of the JP's nymphing mud and I put it right over that split shot.
Cool.
And I can just keep adding that on there until I get it down to the bottom. Again, it's a game changer.
Okay. And you're on the bottom just because you're touching the bottom, it's tapping the bottom, you're getting hung up every now and then, not all the time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, every now and then you want that to be tapping the bottom. And but you got to be careful too. Like during the height of a midge hatch, like we talked about a little while ago, is you could actually be fishing below the fish, and then you're not in the zone. So if those fish are eating midge pupa higher in the water column, then you've got to adjust your indicator and your weight to make sure you're in the right part of the zone.
Okay, super interesting.
And do you fish fast? Are you moving around a lot?
I cover a lot of water. I think the first drift through any given hole is your best chance to catch that fish. I
Uh,
think, at each consecutive drift, you typically, your odds are going down. So I like to cover a lot of water. I don't leave fish to find fish, but if I'm blind fishing a run, which I try not to do, I try to sight fish to feeding fish, actively feeding fish. But if I'm blind fishing it, then I just have a grid-like approach where I'm just methodically covering the water. And there's a lot of tailwaters that, you have to fish some blind stuff in there, but if I can, I try to sight fish like we discussed before. But I do cover a lot of water. When I do a guide trip, I usually fish about a mile of water a day.
oh dear. Okay. Walking wade stuff. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. Do you change flies a lot?
Nope, that's a great question. And I think in the fly fishing world, you have to watch your downtime. And I think a lot of times we as fly anglers we outthink ourselves, and I think people change flies too much. I make 10 times more adjustments with my indicator and my weight than I do changing flies. So typically, if I'm not getting a strike, if I think I should be catching that fish and I'm not, the first thing I do is adjust my indicator and put a little bit more weight on, and usually, boom, you're right into a fish.
Do you think trout, particularly in the summertime, are feeding on multiple things at a time, or do you think they are keyed in on one, like a mayfly that's starting to swim to the surface and they're just keen on that? Or do you think that they might hit a couple other things that might be going on in the water at the same time?
I think, I always tell people, trout feed opportunistically or they feed selectively. And typically, opportunistic fish is going to eat day or night on any particular food organism that's available to them. And that's usually in a non-hatch period time frame. So let's just say it's a classic Colorado bluebird day. There's no clouds in the sky and it's bright and it's sunny and there's just not a lot going on.
Uh,
So that's when fish are going to be, eating opportunistically. You might throw an attractor or something like that, and try to get them to come up. But then, during the height of a midge hatch or the height of a blue wing olive hatch, then they'll get super selective where you have to have the right size, shape, and color to catch those fish. If they're keying on a size 20 Baetis nymph, you better have a size 20 Baetis nymph, otherwise you're not going to catch those fish.
yeah. Talk about some of the flies you've invented. I use that term invented.
Innovation is fun. You typically will design a fly based on a need that you might have. You need a midge pupa or whatever. But I've got a lot of different flies with Umpqua feather merchants. I've got some midge patterns. The top secret midge is probably my top selling fly with Umpqua, but the Black Beauty, we sell a lot of those too. And I've got some Baetis nymphs, and I've got the UV Scud, which is a real popular one.
Yeah.
And I've got some caddis imitations and a lot of different flies that I depend upon heavily for my guiding. Again, guide flies. When we talked about it a little while ago. A guide fly usually is a fly that we think about as quick off the vise but super effective. And we talked about that. But these
Yeah.
are flies that I depend upon to put my people into fish 365 days a year. And some of them
Okay.
are silly flies, like the Mercury Midge is just a little bit of thread and wire and a glass bead, but it's deadly.
Give me the story on that. How did you come up with that fly?
Well, this is a long time ago. This is probably 30 years ago. Bill Black, when I was a commercial or a signature tire for Spirit River, which is no longer in business, but Bill Black sent me out some of these little beads. They were a silver lined glass bead, and he said, "I want you to goof around with these beads and try them out and tell me what you think." And this was before really beadheads had really gotten popular. Tom Rosenbauer wrote an article in Fly Fisherman, shortly thereafter about beads, and I think it was called Beadheads was the article. But so, anyways, I took and the Miracle Nymph was always a really good producer on the South Platte, and it was just a kind of a little grub-like white midge larva with a black head. So it was always a good one. So I thought, I'm going to put this little glass bead on there and just tie a white body with a copper rib on it. And then when I got it on the hook and looked at it, I said, gosh, this looks like mercury. This looks like a thermometer. It looks like a little tube of mercury. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, I'm going to call this the Mercury Midge. And then I kind of backed into that being, with mimicking the when midges emerge, they get that little gas bubble in their thorax. So they get that really highly reflective area of trapped gas, as midge pupa prior to emerging. So it was kind of dumb luck that mimics that. That kind of becomes a trigger. But so then the Mercury series was born, and now I've got other flies with, obviously didn't invent the pheasant tail, but I call it the Mercury pheasant tail because it's got the glass bead on it, and I've got a Mercury Baetis and a Mercury Caddis, and so there's a whole Mercury series now based on that gas bubble or that reflective air.
Sure. Were you back and forth from the vise to the stream, different size beads, different color beads, until you found one that really worked for you?
This was instant success with this glass bead. It was, like I said, a lot of it was just dumb luck. I put that bead on, and I remember going into Cheeseman Canyon, and fish were moving to eat it. And I remember taking the Mercury Baetis down to a run at the Dream Stream, and I remember taking like a dozen fish out of one hole on that Mercury Baetis. And I was down there with a couple friends of mine, and they were like, "Wow, what's going on?" And it really, it's all about that bead, and the bead is the trigger. A lot of Euro guys use triggers; they use hot spots, but the glass bubble mimicking that gas bubble is a trigger, and so they think it's realistic because that's what the real naturals look like.
It's not a gimmick.
Not a gimmick.
It's a real trigger. What about the split back flies that we've been seeing the last couple of years? What do you think of those?
I like that. I like Mitchell split back. His PMD and his Baetis. His PMD is deadly. It's one of the best flies that we use in July and August when the PMDs are coming off in Cheeseman. And it's got a little bead head variation of that. It's got a little tungsten bead on it, so it works good if you want to fish it as a dropper off a little elk hair caddis. But most of the time I nymph that in conjunction with another PMD like Bar's PMD, Bar Merger. It's a great one. But they're great. They're deadly flies.
Super interesting.
Here's Brian Oakland, founder of Got Fishing.
There's really no reason for an angler not to use Got Fishing when everything we do for you is free. We have the best trips around the world. We only work with the best outfitters, and we're definitely going to get you the best deal and the best dates guaranteed. That's why we have clients come back time and time again. We have Don with us on this trip. This has been his 6th fishing adventure with Got Fishing, and I think if you asked him, it is because of all the little things. We don't tell people, we ask questions. What is it that you're looking for? What would be most important to you? Who's coming with you? What's your experience level? And really at the end of the day, what is the most important aspect of this experience that you're looking to take home? And then from there, we just marry them up with some of the best lodges, let them take a look at 2 or 3 different options and pick what's going to be best for them.
Well, there you have it, folks. A pretty good case for choosing Got Fishing for your next big adventure. So what are you waiting for? Give Brian a shout or visit gotfishing.com. Do you struggle finding new trout streams to explore? Tired of stumbling around country roads looking for access points? Looking to escape the crowds? Then look no further, because Trout Routes has meticulously mapped and classified over 50,000 trout streams covering the entire lower 48, including 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy to explore new trout waters. Many times, Trout Routes has helped me find new public water and get into fish fast. And the good folks at Trout Routes have been busy this winter making Trout Routes even better. Enter Stream Cards 2.0, the latest iOS release that brings together more info at your fingertips by organizing data like stream flows, access laws, nearest fly shops into easily accessible tabs for every river and stream in the app. And now you can check real-time stream height and flow rates with river data from stream gauges and compare those with historical data to spot trends. Pretty cool, huh? Planning a trip? Well, you'll love the advanced filter features that let you hone in on top-rated streams, boat ramps, camping spots, and more. So what are you waiting for? Start exploring today by downloading Trout Routes on your Apple or Android phone.
I'm kind of curious for anglers that are heading out and hitting new streams that they've never been to before. What kind of advice do you have for how to approach a new piece of water?
You can always, if you're new to the area, the best thing is always to get some local help. Go to a fly shop and ask them, hey, what should I be using? And that kind of thing, and you can also you can say in the river. Obviously, if you say in the river, you're going to get a broad scope of what's in there. You can see if there's stoneflies, or you see if there's, mayflies and that kind of stuff. And that always works well. And every now and then I'll use a throat pump, if I catch fish to see what they're eating, but very rarely do I just don't like to use a stomach pump or a throat pump that often. But most of the time, just observation is super key. If you see a Betas, on the water, or you see a PMD, or a lot of it's just time of year and time of day. And then the more about entomology, and the more you know about matching the hatch, you learn it. You know that a PMD is not going to come off in March, they're going to come off in July. So there's just that observation, and just you just learn as you go, and that's the beautiful thing about it.
I'm curious, like if, let's say I'm coming out to Evergreen, Colorado, and I'm going to go fish the blue for the first time. I get some advice. By the way, the guys in your shop are some of the best, but I'm not just saying that. I was literally coming out to Colorado to fish. I was going to go fish Tarryall and some alpine lakes, and your guys had just been up to those alpine lakes. So sometimes you go in fly shops, and I'll always ask them, when's the last time you've been out? And they'll say like 2 weeks ago. Okay, I'm not talking to you.
Right. We're really blessed. We've got a very passionate group of individuals that work at our store, and they eat, sleep, and drink fishing.
They kind of do.
So when they're always fishing on their day off, and you can't fake passion. And that's the one thing that's the driving force behind our business is we've got a bunch of passionate guides that really love to do what they do, and they go fishing on their day off. It's not a job. It's a way of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. What do they do in the winter? Are they ski patrol guys, or what are they doing?
We're fortunate. We have a lot of full-time guides. We have about 8 full-time guides. We can't keep them, all busy during the winter, but we got some guides going out in the winter too, and then we do have some seasonal guides that have other things. We've got a couple paramedics that work for us, and we've had guys that do part-time that have other jobs during the winter. Yeah, some of them, they do snow removal in the winter, and whatever it takes to pay the bills.
Okay. All right. And so anyway, got some great advice from the shop, and I felt like I was getting straight answers for all my questions, and they, I don't know, they just weren't trying to sell me something. I did buy some things, but they weren't trying to sell me something I didn't need,
right?
Which, you really love if you've been doing this for a while. You've usually got one of everything in your bag. You just need a few local flies and some local knowledge.
Right.
And off you go. The big thing in Colorado I've found is just, just the crowds. I love Colorado. It's an amazing fishery, and we've kind of been touching on it a little bit, but what advice do you have for anglers who are coming out to stream like a Cheeseman or a Deckers or something like that, where it's going to be pretty crowded? Like, where should I be fishing? Is it pocket water that people are skipping over? What advice do you have for us?
It's, for me, having been, born and raised here and fishing the South Platte for 50 years, it's a different river. It's hard to explain. It's a busy place. And I think the most important thing is, we're all in this together, and we all have to work at this together, and we all have to enjoy this together. So etiquette's one of the most important things. And that seems to be one of the things that I think that has kind of gone by the wayside is, people, the etiquette isn't as good as it once was. So communication's key. And I think, if you outwork somebody, if you hike a little further than somebody else, like see some of that different water, maybe that the average guy's not fishing, that's one way of doing it.
Like, give me an example. What's different water the average guy isn't fishing?
Just like say that some of the pocket water, some of the in-between water, the water that the average guy might be, overlooking, everybody's going to fish the classic riffle run pool, just the honey holes, right? Everybody's going to target those. And, and I think if everybody moves, that's helpful too. Just don't stay in the same hole for 3 hours. That's bad etiquette in itself as well. So
that's rude.
I think if everybody just gets in, moves, communicates, it works just fine, and but it's harder. It's harder than ever, and it's not going to change anytime soon. The city is just, like I said earlier, it's bursting at the seams, and there's more and more people coming into the sport, and that's a good thing. It really is a good thing.
Do you find that that if you talk to people, most people are willing to work something out with you? In other words, they'll say, all right, well, you may say, do you mind if I slip in right over here? He says, well, actually, I'm heading that way, but if you go over there, I'm okay with it. Do you find that's usually the case?
Yeah, and a lot of guys, and I would be the same way. If I'm out, if I'm guiding a client, and a lot of times people want to stay out of my way because they know I'm making a living. So they just, it's a courtesy that I've come to really appreciate from people.
Nice.
That they just say, where you going? You're making a living, and I just want to stay out of your way. So that's nice. And and when I'm fishing on my own or whatever, again, you just I always just ask people, hey, you going up? You going down? Or,
Okay.
And instead of high holing a guy, give him a couple holes or 3 holes. Everything's really based on how many people are out there. If there's a guy in every hole, then you just have to take what you can get. But if you don't see a guy for a half a mile below you or above you, then that's the one that always shocks
Fish
me.
there.
If some guy just, there's not a guy anywhere in sight, and he comes and fishes right above me. That's the one that gets you. So
And doesn't say anything to you, just jumps in.
right.
Yeah. And part of me is like, I'm afraid if I say something to him, he's going to say no. But I found most of the time they don't say no. Most of the time it's a friendly guy. I mean, we're out there trying to enjoy ourselves. Most people are in a good mood when they're fly fishing, and if you just talk to them, I find I make friends by doing that, right? And what's better in life than that? You wind up with a new friend.
Yep. Yeah, I can remember a guy that was on the other side of the stream, and he hooked a big fish, and he was coming down, and he got into some water that was probably a little too deep, and I could tell, I was guiding, but I could tell this guy might need a little help, and I was concerned about his safety, but anyways, he went in over his waders, but anyway, it turned out, he got the fish in, and I was there, and
we had a fish on
for him, and we became friends, and he hired me. So,
he just happened to bump into Pat Dorsey, and now you're guiding him, huh? How about that?
Yeah. So you just never know. I mean, I just, like I said, we're all in this together, and I try to treat everybody with respect, and I think that's just the way we all need to be.
I agree.
Hey anglers, if you're on the hunt for fishing gear that's as tough as you are, look no further than Adams Built Fishing Gear. Since 2014, Adams Built has been the go-to choice for anglers who demand quality without breaking the bank. Their lineup of lightweight waders, high-quality nets, and meticulously designed fly boxes is second to none. But here's what really impressed me. Adams Built stands behind their products like no other. Every single item is guaranteed to last. Yep, you heard that right. And get this, Adams Built waders even come with a lifetime repair or replace guarantee, with you only paying for shipping. Now that's a deal you can't beat. So why settle for gear that won't last? Make the smart choice and gear up with Adams Built Fishing Gear today. Ask your local dealer for Adams Built or visit www.adamsbuiltfishing.com and tell them Steve sent you from the Destination Angler podcast.
So the way I've heard of you before, but I think the way you and I got connected this last time was one of my listeners, Jim Aylesworth from Texas. He's fished with over 300 guides, he tells me. I think he bid on at the Trout Unlimited banquet. He bid on a trip with you. Does that sound about right?
He did, yeah. I was down at Trout Fest down in Texas last year, and
okay.
He bid on that trip, and we went and spent the day on the Williams Fork River, and we had a grand day. It was a lot of fun, and Jim's a good guy, and he's a really good angler, and
oh, is he good?
I enjoyed our time on the water, and hope he enjoyed it as well.
I'm sure he did, enough to get me reconnected with you.
I had a chance to sit down with Jim, and I asked him about his experiences with fly fishing with Pat. Here you go.
All right, folks, I'm really pleased to have one of my listeners on the show, and I would classify Jim as a super listener because he's been reaching out to me now for the last, 3 or 4 years. Jim, does that sound about right?
That's correct. A little over 2 years ago is the first time I reached out. Just loved the podcast and had to say hello.
Yeah. And Jim, how many places in the world have you been fishing?
I have been to 165 different spots, but I keep count. I have 342 guides. That, for example, I fished the Colorado area, the Arkansas River. Well, I've been to the same river 8 or 9 times, let's say, but with 6 different guides. And so you can see how different times, different places. So that's why there's so many more guides in water, but I keep track of them all because I'm a writer. I keep a log of every one.
Okay, so this is why I wanted to ask Jim a question. 2 questions. One, how did you end up fishing with Pat Dorsey, and what was that experience like?
Great one. And that is that I go to Trout Unlimited. I'm actively involved in the Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited, a fascinating chapter, the largest chapter in the U.S. And yet we really don't have any native trout water in the whole state. But as you know, we stock the Guadalupe River. And so that's why the Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited. Every year when you were at that meeting in Colorado, we have Trout Fest, which is a huge undertaking. About 4,000 people show up and we have a large auction. But one of the donated items I saw was fly fishing with the famous Pat Dorsey. Well, you know who he is. He's a famous guy. He's a fantastic speaker. That's how I knew him as well. Shop owner, fly tire, prolific writer of books. See him, and I can't tell you how many magazine articles. So I walked in there with the intent I'm going to win. Well,
Yeah.
Steve, somebody else did too. So the bidding went up and went up and went up. And I can remember they said the value was $600, and I won it for $1,400.
1,400. That's a deal. You got the fish.
But the deal was, it's a donation of Trout Unlimited, and that's how I
Yeah.
look at that. I don't look at it as a $1,400 guide trip. In fact, I still even gave him a couple 300 more as a tip. No, the point wasn't the money. It was to go fishing with this guy who's just a
Yeah.
legend. I really wanted to find out about him. And then, and then, of course, as you know, and you found out from your podcast, he's the most well-known tailwater expert on the South Platte system. He knows that system inside and out. But 2 days before our trip, he called and made I guess the best way I would have to describe it is, it's kind of like in football where someone calls and makes an audible, right?
Yeah.
Football, the quarterback. Well, he made an audible 2 days before our trip. He said, the South Platte's not fishing. I don't know what's going on. There's a place I go in the fall called the Williams Fork. Let's go there. And so it was a 2-mile tailwater that goes into the Colorado, the upper Colorado River. So we get out there, and it starts off with about a 3/4 mile hike. You cross the river and start hiking up along the river. And I like that part first because it gets rid of crowds. But then sure enough, there were other people there. So Pat said, the heck with this, we're going all the way up. We hiked all the way up to the headwaters and then started working our way down. And again, a great guide sees this. He started noticing the water was dropping, got on his phone, tailwater guide, right? Saw that the CFS had gone from 125 down to 100. So the bite stopped. No fish was biting.
Oh, really? Put it down.
All but one other fisherman left the water. They were all just rookies. You could tell by looking at them. So now we start going to fish the exact spots they were standing, Steve. And of course, because I'm with Pat, I'm catching.
Yeah.
Pat has this understanding of trout behavior, along with expertise of fly design, over 30 years of experience guiding this kind of water. I just had great success when others got skunked.
Yeah.
But that's not all. He also has knowledge of the fly fishing, the great outdoor photography that he does all the time. You know, I love taking pictures. He was able to help me. And I'm a writer. And he gave me some insight into fly writing and writing for fly fishing magazines and who some of the characters are from Fly Fisherman Magazine, Ross Purnell, people like that.
Yeah.
Just all day. To me, it reminded me of the day I fished with Tom Rosenbauer. You're fishing with a legend in our business. There's a reason they're a legend, because they're just good people. That's the
Yeah.
thing about fly fishing, just amazes me. It's people like you, Steve, just good people in the business.
that's nice.
Just a lot of fun.
Yeah. You just put me in a category with some really amazing people. So I don't know if I'm deserving of that, but
Well, my perception, you're one of those giants. So yes, yeah, by all
oh my
means.
gosh, that's really nice of you. So Pat Dorsey, like in all your years of going with guides, what kind of little things does Pat do that separate him from the average guide?
Great. I find that all the time. And a couple of things I always look for. One, gives you instruction, but doesn't make you feel stupid about it. Even though you're making the same mistake a fourth
Great
time,
point.
doesn't say, Steve, that's the fourth time I've told you. There are guides that act that way. Pat's
there
not.
are.
You don't even realize what's going on. And then at one point, it was that knowledge. I'm looking down at the water. I know you've done this, the same thing I'm doing. I don't see anything. Pat sees fish feeding. They're under the surface. They're down there. There's 3 of them. I don't see them, but I take his word for it. It was all a matter of just getting the fly deep enough. Once we got the weight down, boom, boom, boom. I caught all 3, and they were huge. But
Really?
in fact, there's a guide there telling me, one, exactly what fly to use, how much weight to get it down, and where they were. I never would have caught him. I never saw him, but he did.
Did you make a lot of adjustments? Did he have you adjust your weight a lot in your
He
flies?
did, yeah. That's one of those differences. I find that when I fish with Tom doesn't like taking all the time to change flies, whereas Pat knew what they were eating. He just, how do I match it? And so he must have changed flies 6 or 7 times until he finally had the fly, and then he knew they're eating this, they're just not getting down there, and he added more weight. And that's so
Huh.
often the case, especially when you're nymph fishing, to get it down a little bit further. That's all it took, because it's fast water, so it doesn't sink very fast. So with
Yeah.
added weight, I got it down there and I started catching.
Had a good day with them. Huh.
Oh, a fantastic day. And just the other aspects, though, too, is that talking the history of our sport, the famous people he's been with and what they're like, and authors, what it's like to write, his family and what it's like to grow up, all those aspects. But then the other one that I really enjoyed was see how you can get this is the perfect photo. And he shows me, and to a non-photographer, you wouldn't see it, but he has that eye for what the camera's about to capture.
Huh. So he gave you some photography tips. Oh, that's neat.
He did really nice ones. And I've read his books. He really is a prolific writer. He's one of those kind of foot by foot, ankle by ankle, every step you make in this water, where to go, how to fish it, what to fish it with,
Yeah.
kind of explanation books. And he gives great detail.
Jim, thanks for being on the show. It was great seeing you again, and best of luck to you in all your adventures.
All right, Steve, my very best to you, sir.
All right.
Tight lines.
Yeah, you bet. Do you have a most memorable day or fish in all your years of guiding? What sticks out?
I've had so many crazy days. I've had, where there's been disgruntled, relationships that you rekindle for people to people.
You mean people you're guiding are disgruntled? Not
Yep.
about you, about each other?
Yeah, and it was my job to try to kind of get them back good terms, and I've had a couple that got engaged on the river. Her
Really?
wedding ring was inside her fly box, and that's how he proposed. And crazy things like my wife and I got married in my drift boat. So
in your drift boat?
In my drift boat, yeah.
That's awesome.
There's been a lot of cool things, and I've had opportunities to fish with all walks of life, from country music stars to guys that just they're starting to learn how to fish. So it's and athletes, and got a chance to guide Dusty Baker one time, and he was out there chewing on his toothpick just like he does in the duck. So,
it's all right.
But it's a fun job, and I take every day super serious and try to make the most of everything.
Yeah. Any famous people? Dusty Baker, you named him. Any country music stars or?
We took out the Jason Aldean's guys, and that was really fun. And then you get the perk of getting to go to the concert and going and seeing their bus and all that kind of stuff. So I've guided Brian White. He's a country music artist, and so there's been some of those fun times, and some professional athletes, and you just like I said, they all like it the same reason we do. They have a lot of stress in their life, and they like to go out and relieve some stress.
I mean, they put their pants on one leg at a time like we do?
Just like we do.
Same way. Or the waiters?
Yep. That's what I say. I tell everybody that. I used that line yesterday at the banquet. I said, everybody puts their pants on one, the waiters on one leg at a time.
Do you get a little nervous when you're taking out a big time, star? Are you thinking, oh man, here we go? Yeah,
there's always a little extra pressure, and there's always pressure. That I think if you're a good guide, that you always have pressure.
Yeah,
and that's how you're sized up. You're sized up is, and if you catch a lot of fish, you're a good guide. If you don't catch fish, you're a bad guide. And I think that's a lot of times how people, that's how they compare you is the numbers of fish that you catch. But there's more to fishing than catching, and it's my goal always is I want my customer to walk away a better angler in the afternoon than they were in the morning, and have fun, enjoy it, and obviously catching fish is positive reinforcement that you're doing it right, and that's what I try to teach people. I try to teach them that if you've got good technique, the fish are going to come, and that's important.
Right. Do you remember your first guide trip ever?
I do. It was at Decker's. Actually, I hope my original partner, Jim Kenyon, will watch this podcast. But my first guide trip, and Jim still laughs about this today, the guy didn't show up. So I had a
He
guy
pull you off.
and he didn't show up for the trip. And I tell you, you want to talk about a rocky start to a guiding career. That was
Yeah,
so. But then,
man.
but I remember my actual guide trip. It was down at Deckers, and when you're a guide, you're just fishing through your customer. You're doing everything that you would do when you're out on your own, and you make all the decisions and with the flies and the weight and everything, just like you do on your own. And so this will be my 33rd year of guiding and
Dang,
fishing right now. I
that's
started
amazing.
in 1992 at the Blue Quill, and
Does it get old, Pat? Does it ever get old?
no, the only thing that becomes tougher as you age is just it's tougher on your body.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, many times working 29 or 30 days in a month, and
Oh, God.
I can't do that anymore. And then I started to go, I'd work like 14 days on and then take 2 off. And I like to work Monday through Friday,
Okay.
mainly because the weekends are so busy anyway, but just it keeps me fresher. There's nothing worse than a guide that's burned out, and I always try to stay fresh and positive and passionate. And I think, when the passion goes away, when it comes a job,
Yeah.
that's when you got to hang it up.
It doesn't feel like that to you then, huh?
Yeah.
No kidding. Do you spend much time in the shop?
Very little.
Really?
Yeah. So my world is I stay very busy guiding. And then my wife and I, we also do a lot of destination travel.
Yeah.
Next year, we're going to do 3 weeks in Argentina. We're going to do 2 weeks in Brazil. We're going to do a week in Alaska, and then we do a couple trip down in San Juan. So there's 6 weeks of destination travel it's in my schedule now, and then pretty much show season starts January 1 and then ends the first week of April. So, like we talked about, it's every week I'm in a different town, for the first quarter. So I'm rarely in the store at all anymore. I'm in there just a few times a year. But the good news is Dennis Steinbeck, I'm his partner, and Chris Steinbeck, his son, and then we got a fabulous staff up there that, my responsibility is more, guiding and promoting the business
Right.
at these shows. Chris and I travel, and we're going to set up a booth at the Seattle show, and then we're there to promote our online business, and we're there to promote our brand and our guiding and so forth.
Right.
It keeps me busy.
At what point in your life did you go, you know what, this guiding thing is, I'm feeling this. This is what I want to do.
I knew early on I wanted to. I went to school to be a woodshop teacher down at University of Southern Colorado, and
A what teacher?
a woodshop.
Wood shop.
Yeah, so woodworking was always a passion
Awesome.
of mine, and
Love
so
that.
that's and all my mom and my dad and my aunts, my uncles, everybody was a teacher, and so I'm still a teacher. I'm just a trout teacher, and and I enjoy teaching fly fishing schools. I taught the Orvis fly fishing school early on in my career, and then the guiding. But Jack Dennis was my mentor growing up. I'm a self-taught fly tyer. I learned how to tie flies from Jack Dennis's book, his Western manual on. And I always wanted to meet Jack, and I went to one of his seminars and I met Jack, and then Jack and I, we became really good friends. And so he was my mentor, and I wanted to be like Jack. I wanted to be a guide. I wanted to be a fly shop owner, and I wanted to travel the country, just doing what I do now. And so I'm very fortunate that it all worked out.
You are living the life, man. You're doing it.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate.
You had the vision. Yeah. What surprised you the most along your journey?
There's really hasn't been any big surprises. It obviously takes a family that's behind you, a wife that's super supportive about it. You're not going to get rich writing books. You're not going to get rich being a fishing guide, but the quality of life is amazing. And some of the places that I've been able to travel to, around the globe, fish and to be able to share my passion with others and get paid to do it. I think it's been a great ride, and I anticipate probably guiding for another 5 years or so. And
Okay.
then I'm going to probably toss the towel in on the guiding. I'll be 65, and I think then I'm going to probably be, more of a shop role and probably more destination travel.
It's going to drive you crazy sitting in that shop, isn't it?
It probably will, and I'll probably reassess it. I'll probably be like, Brett Favre and come out of retirement or something.
All right. They'll be like, get out of here, man.
I love it. I love fishing and guiding so much. It's physically demanding on your body
Right.
to walk as much as I walk and to take the abuse that I take.
You know, especially in the wintertime, I got to believe that, you know, those cold days, your fingers are numb, nose is falling off.
Yep,
It gets cold in Colorado at 8,000 feet, doesn't it?
it does. We had some cold weather here a couple of weeks ago. It was downright cold.
Did you cancel trips then?
Oh yeah, we canceled trips. Some of the rivers that we fish on were frozen, so we had we did. I did do a trip a couple weeks ago with a fella. He drove in from New Mexico, and we started the day. It was 12 below zero, and we were kind of
12 below.
Yeah,
Really?
we did it was because he drove in 8 hours, and I wasn't going to cancel
You
it.
didn't.
A lot of times, we make the call. It's going to be cold. We just say it's about having fun. Let's pick another day when it's going to be a little nicer and fishing's going to be a little better.
Well, how do you keep your feet warm when it's 12 below outside?
I mean, it's tough. The water, obviously the water is way warmer than the outside temperature. So, but anytime the water's below 40 degrees, your feet are numb. And I just, I wear smart wool socks.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I do to just keep my feet and just dress in layers. I mean, the old joke now is there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing. So,
Yeah.
You just gotta dress in layers and try to stay warm.
Stuff those hand warmers down inside your waders?
Oh yeah, I run the hand warmers, and that helps out a little bit. I don't wear gloves. My hands are pretty accustomed to fishing in cold weather, and we actually teach winter clinics. So we my schedule lately has been, I leave on a Thursday, we fly to a city, set up a booth, we do a trade show like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we fly home Monday morning, and then I try to guide on Tuesdays and Wednesdays during the winter.
Okay.
And then just tee it back up again and get back on the road.
That's hardcore, man. Good for you. What inspires you to write all these? You've written, 5 books? Is that right?
5 books now, yeah. I wrote the first book on the South Platte, and Roger Hill wrote the original book on that, and it was a really good book, and it was only encompassed Cheeseman Canyon and the Dream Stream section of it. And Jim Prudis, who published it, and then he took it out of print, and I was just talking to Jim, and I said, gosh, who's going to write the new book on the South Platte? And Jim goes, you are.
Yeah.
So I got my first book. He just looked me right in the eye and he goes, you are. And I said, I am. And so I wrote the first book, and I had a lot of help from my father. My dad was pretty crafty at the pen. So I learned to write just from, just working my way through it. And my dad really taught me the craft of writing. And anyways, he helped me out, got it cleaned up, and then got it edited. And then that first book led to an article with South Platte with Ross Purnell and Fly Fisherman.
Okay.
That was back in 2005. And then, I don't know, one book led to the next. And I don't have any new books in the works right now. But again, you don't get rich writing.
Is that right? Okay.
Some guy told me a long time ago, he said, you're not going to make any money writing books, but to make money, you've got to write books. And I thought that, and it's like, there's a lot of truth to that. So if you write a book, people seem to take you a little bit more seriously as a professional. And so anyways, it's been fun. I've written 5 different books, and, 3 fly tying books, and the Tailwater book and the South Platte book.
What have you learned about people through all these years of guiding?
Yeah, I think the human race is pretty amazing. There's a lot of cool guys, and people that share the passion of the outdoors are just great people. They've got big hearts. They're conservationists at heart. They really enjoy being outside, and that's the thing that's so important for us is just the love of the outdoors, and that's why we do it. I love my job. I get excited about my job every day, and it never has become a job. I take people fishing and enjoy every minute of it.
Yeah, that's great. You're a lucky man. If you find what you love, you don't work a day in your life. I think I've heard somebody say.
Yep, it's very true.
I think there's a lot of truth. I don't think I'm patient enough to be a guide. I think I'd just be, come on, let's go catch something.
There's days that when they're challenging, and you don't always have the ideal conditions, or you got a new person that's you're teaching to fish, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So you just have to have realistic expectations. That's important, and I'm real patient.
Are you?
We
Okay.
still have kids, and so it's I just try to I just try to be super patient, and like you said, I want my customer to be just a better angler at the end of the day.
That's cool. And your son's working in a fly shop somewhere.
Yeah, I'm super proud of all of our children, and Forrest, he's the boy that's following me in my footsteps. So that's my oldest boy, and he's a co-owner of a fly shop in North Carolina called Hunter Banks.
There you
And
go.
it's a small mom and pop fly shop, just like the Blue Quill Angler. Been in business about the same time as the Blue Quill Angler, and
Huh.
they have a great little fly shop out there. So if you ever
Do
get
they? Okay.
Carolina, it's worthwhile checking out Hunter Banks.
Hunter Banks in what town?
It's in Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville. Okay, there you go. You can meet your progeny out there doing
Yep.
doing what you do. Good deal, man. Pat, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. We had a lot of good talks here.
Yeah, we covered some ground, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So how can people get in touch with you?
The best way is just you can get a hold of me at the Blue Quill Angler, bluequillangler.com. And, you can call, leave a message, or my email is patd@bluequillangler.com. And, send me an email. We want to do whatever we can to help you succeed as a fly angler. If you're coming from some other state and you want to learn how to fish the South Platte, or you just need some advice on flies or gear or whatever, we want to help. We want to see you succeed. So just
That's all right.
reach out to us.
Okay, none of you people reach out to Pat till I have, okay? Because I know he's a busy guy. He's hard to book. So I get first dibs.
I'm very fortunate. I have a pretty busy schedule, and
Yeah.
people have been kind enough to keep me off the streets.
I'll bet. Pat, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of the Destination Angler. It's been great to have you. And we'll post the contact info on Destination Angler show notes. And we've got some really great pictures that Pat sent along that we'll put out on Facebook and Instagram. As always, you can email me or DM me with your comments and suggestions and ideas for new shows. I'd love to hear from you about that. If you got some guides that you fish with you really love, drop me a line, introduce me. I'd love to talk to those people. It's Haigh at destinationanglerpodcast.com. If you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. That is a great little band out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.